Welcome back to the show. It is your girl Sarah right here on Relax Radio. Now you're tuned into the final hour of the sunrise, and like I said, I'll be keeping you company all the way until 9. And it is in fact the final hour of the show. So, like I said, super excited to be here because we have a lot of interesting content. We have a lot of interesting things to discuss with you today, and make sure you're a part of this conversation because I would absolutely love it if you were a part of this conversation because I would love to hear your input, your thoughts, your opinions, whatever it is, even your questions if you have any about what I'm talking. Make sure you text me on 078 so you can be a part of this conversation and you know um, you can actually contribute to this conversation as well because right here on Relax Radio we're all about the positives, no negatives, and we always prioritize you and make sure your voice, your opinion, your thoughts are heard. So make sure you text me on 078 to share your thoughts, to share your opinions, whatever it is, right here with me on the sunrise. Okay. Now, also while you're at it, you can definitely go check out our, socials, which is, really interesting, which has a lot of tips, which also has a lot of information about everything we talk about, everything we will be talking about, and also, a lot of other fun, interesting content that will definitely make your day or even your week. So just make sure you go follow it because it's definitely going to make life much more entertaining for you, especially because it's in the middle of a pandemic. We're all stressed out, we're all anxious, we all want some form of change in our lives, so might as well just go check it out because that way you can actually make sure that things you can make sure that things change up a little bit for you. Okay, so make sure you do that. Now, just a quick reminder also that our app is actually available for download, so make sure you head on over to the Apple App Store or even the Google Play Store and download our app, so that way no matter what time of the day it is, you can always talk to us. You can share your thoughts and opinions with us as well. So let's get into the conversation because we're talking about burnout. We're talking about how some people completely change their lives, completely they completely changed their lives, they made that difference that they needed to make, and they're currently living much better lives after experiencing severe burnout. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. And these days, we in fact feel the effects of burnout so much more. It's so much more intense, definitely because of what we're currently going through. We're in the middle of a pandemic, we're so much more stressed out and anxious than before, so obviously we feel these things with so much more intensity, so much more, like our brains have so much more negative thoughts. So because of all of that, I felt like it was very important that we spoke about something positive. We spoke about how you can actually completely change your life around, how you can get rid of burnout, and you can have some peace when it comes to your mental and your physical health. Okay, so let's get into that conversation. But before I get into that conversation, I actually want to discuss what exactly burnout is. Now, burnout is actually extreme exhaustion, insomnia, crippling self doubt, extreme despondency, and even feeling what is the point. Now, you can't deny that all of us have felt at least one of these symptoms, right? Because I myself have definitely, felt like, what was the point in everything I was doing? Like, what is the point of even being alive and just waking up every day and doing whatever you're supposed to do, right? And obviously, we've all definitely felt extremely exhausted. In fact, that exhaustion has in fact exacerbated because of how exhausted we are of staying at home, and also of how exhausted we are both mentally and physically of the things that we're currently facing because of the pandemic. And there have been many sleepless nights. There have been many instances of crippling self doubt and extreme despondency as well. So I think it's very safe to say, and I know I'm not wrong if I say that all of us have at least experienced one of these symptoms, or we've felt one of these things. So what's important is more often than not, it's not actually recognized as an actual condition. A lot of people tend to think, oh, it's just a temporary thing. It comes and it goes. You get tired after obviously overworking, but that's it. Like, it's just a very temporary thing. But the truth is, it's not. Even though it's not necessarily recognized as a medical condition, it is something that is not temporary. Sometimes, it can be there for long periods of time. It can affect you for long periods of time as well. So obviously, it's not something that just comes and goes like that. Right now, burnout is actually caused by chronic overwork, being constantly sleep deprived and hyper stressed over a period of weeks or months. Right. So, like I said, this is not like, a one time, two-time thing that comes and goes. It's there for a few days and then it disappears. It's not something like that. Sometimes it can even be extended for months, sometimes weeks or months. So obviously, just imagine being in this constant sense of exhaustion, of stress, of anxiety, of crippling self-doubt and despondency for a few months. Right, obviously at one point it's going to get to you. Right, at one point you're going to realize, I can't keep doing this anymore. I need to make some changes because I can't keep living like this. And something that has been found from through research is, when it comes to things like burnout, it actually leads to higher rates of anxiety, depression and suicide. And it also leads to less productivity, less efficiency in the workplace as well. And something else that also needs to be said is, when people try to talk about burnout, when they try to tell the human when they try to tell HR that they are having a hard time dealing with all the work, the most common answer that they get is, oh, you should have known the risks when you got this job, because when it comes to whatever job you do, you are supposed to deal with all of this stress. It's normal. And because of that, if you can't handle the job, then leave it. Right, which is in fact a very negative way to respond to someone who's struggling with their mental health, who's struggling with their physical health as well, to actually make that change that they need to make. Now, for example, if you take the modern workforce, it is in fact a constant tension for anybody under 50. And this is because, we feel like our jobs could collapse at any moment. This is because we feel like our jobs are so insecure. We feel like our contribution to our companies are so insecure, or, it's not really enough, that, one small thing could go wrong, and then we could just end up losing our jobs. So obviously, we're constantly under this tension. We're constantly under this, sense of stress and worry and even anxiety of losing our jobs, because we know that even if the smallest mistake happens, that it could potentially mean you losing your job. And especially, it's not like people want to lose their jobs in the middle of a pandemic, right? Because look, if you're already struggling to survive, especially if you're the primary if you're the primary caregiver or the breadwinner of a family, then chances are you would probably not want to lose your job in the middle of a pandemic, because it can in fact result in you having to go through a lot of other problems. Right. But the thing is, even though that's the case, you don't really have a choice, and you sort of need to keep working until, at least until the situation gets better. Now, when it comes to different experiences of burnout, it's actually quite a large spectrum. Right, because even though there are common symptoms, people feel burnout very differently. It can be a different experience for you, it can be a completely different experience for me. Right, so it's on the spectrum, and some people actually describe long periods of being basically incapacitated and unable to see a way back to functioning normally. So imagine how bad your burnout has to be for you to begin to think that you can't get back to normal at all, like ever. Things will never ever get back to normal. So obviously, in instances like that, it becomes very scary, it becomes very dangerous, because your brain is already giving up. Your brain is already thinking, hey, look, we can't get back to normal. This is just how our life is going to be for the rest of this life. So just get used to it. Now, one of the most overwhelming feelings actually was loneliness, and there was this really profound sense that work had taken over everything in the lives of people who were experiencing burnout. And why they felt this way is, more often than not, when we try to establish ourselves in our workplaces, when we're trying to establish our worth and our contribution to a company, we never say no, right? And that's because we want our bosses, we want our company to see our value, we want our companies to see our worth. So because we actually want them to see that worth, we want them to see how important we are to the company. It doesn't matter if your boss calls you at 3 a.m. in the morning and asks you to, look into some documents or send some email or even to draft some proposal for, say, advertising or whatnot. Chances are you would just give up on your sleep and do that anyway, because it's your boss who's asking you to do it. So it doesn't matter if it's after hours. You need to do this work to sort of make sure that your boss realizes you're very important to this company, that they can't possibly fire you. You want to secure your job in the workplace, so obviously you will do something like that, right? Now, that is actually one of the biggest reasons of like leading to burnout, right? And it's also this huge problem that a lot of us have right now, that we're not in a position to say no. And as a result of that, we actually tend to neglect all the good things in our life, things like relationships, our friends, even our families, our well-being and our self-care. We tend to neglect those things because we have work. And the truth of the matter is that because we have work all the time, we can't ever, focus on our relationships. We can't mend any of the relationships we have. We can't even grow in terms of our relationships because we just don't have time. There is no distinction between your work and your personal life, because your work life has just trickled down to your personal life as well. And your work life and your personal life is basically the same thing. Your personal life is non-existent because you're constantly working. Sometimes you're not even at your job, sometimes you're just at home, but you're still doing work. So then you begin to sort of you start questioning, right? Where do I draw the line? Like, how do I change things? What changes can I make? So then in instances like that, it gets very, very hard for you to draw that line, for you to realize, look, I need to take care of myself. This is very, very unhealthy, and this is not good for me as well. And another, and very other common thing that leads to burnout is this, hustle culture that is very glorified. Everyone talks about it, everyone loves it, everyone wants to talk about how much of time and how much of effort they put into working, and they love to boast about the extra hours they stay at work. Even, things like how they work, how they, even come to work on the weekends, which honestly, if you think about it, is not something to boast about. In fact, it's quite pathetic, because you don't have any time for yourself. So obviously then there is a lot of stress, there is a lot of burnout that people face. Now, burnout has in fact intensified during this pandemic because of these additional feelings of stress and anxiety that we've all had to experience. So because of that, it's gotten very, very hard for all these people out there, for everyone out here as well, to actually sort of prioritize themselves, to prioritize their well-being, and to prioritize their personal lives. So because of all of this, we have this question as to whether we can actually get out of this situation. Can we change things for our future? Do we actually just have to keep slaving away every day, sacrificing our physical health, our mental health, our personal relationships, our personal lives? Do we have to keep sacrificing all of these just so you can make your boss, see your worth? um and also, like, whether you can keep sacrificing your mental and physical health, right? Which means that then you actually need to make this decision to prioritize your mental and your physical well-being. Because if you don't prioritize your mental and physical well-being, then you're not going to be much of a person to actually work, because if you're not okay, then you can't really work, right? Now, things like chronic stress at work can actually lead to listlessness, fatigue, and it can actually have a much higher risk of stroke and heart disease. But what's good, or what's positive, and what we should focus on, is that there are ways to save yourself before it's too late. Now, make sure you stay tuned to this conversation, because I will actually be here in a few more minutes after this break to talk to you about the ways in which you can save yourself before it's late, or the ways in which you can make that change to make sure you're much, much better without that really toxic job, okay? But until then, it's actually time for me to head into this small break.
Climb Mount Everest. That is one of that's in my bucket list. You're laughing, but that is the facts right there. I'd love to do that. That is something I'm looking forward to do, hopefully.
Climb Everest.
Mount Everest. I mean, okay, not the very tip of Mount Everest, maybe the base camp at least.
You're talking about mental health. If you went out and got some exercise in the fresh air, That will improve your mental health. It will make you feel better.
That's true. That is true. I wholeheartedly agree. But then for some people, it's how do you find the motivation to, especially when it comes to riding a bicycle, to do it again and again and again and again? It's a cycle that you have to be used to. How do you do it? What makes you wake up in the morning and decide, hey, I'm going to pick my bike up today. I'm going to cycle. What makes you want to do that?
What makes me want to do that?
Yeah. What do you like? What could you give listeners, like people listening in right now? What kind of tip could you give them?
Well, the first tip I would give them, if you haven't tried it before, try it. It can open up new horizons. It will make you fitter. It will definitely make you fitter. Cycling is one of the best forms of aerobic exercise you can do.
It sounds like, I mean, if you think about it, yeah, it sounds like great fun. Because what essentially you're trying to say is also at the same time, when you, if you look at it from this perspective, with regards to mental health, especially when you look at it with mental health, this is another way to fight it. I feel like you go outside, you meet more people, you interact with, socially, you will interact with more people, and you're keeping fit, you're making connections, you're breathing in the good and exhaling the bad. I feel like that's a great thing right there.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got a better way with words than I have, I'll tell you. But you're quite right. What you say there. You're quite right.
I mean, I've been doing this for quite some time. I mean, hey, you'll get the hang of it.
I've been doing it for about 10 minutes now, so yeah.
That I can never really understand people staying in one room the whole day when you can have the world to see. I am a traveler. I travel. I love traveling. Traveling is just one of the things I do. And yeah, on top of my bucket list was, to one time, hopefully when I get there, go to Nepal and climb Mount Everest. That is one of that's in my bucket list. You're laughing, but that is the facts right there. I'd love to do that. That is something I'm looking forward to do, hopefully.
Climb Everest.
Mount Everest. I mean, okay, not the very tip of Mount Everest, maybe the base camp at least.
Base camp, yeah.
At least.
Would you be able to cycle there?
Oh.
One of the easiest ways to increase your net worth is to ensure that you have higher cash flow. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to not buy things on hire purchase, not buy things over months and months because you can't afford them now, but you want it. It's kind of that delayed gratification. Rather than buy that couch, that car, that stereo, that computer, whatever item, and pay it off over 12, 24, 36 months at an interest rate, rather invest that money, make do with what you've got, and then after 12, 24, 36 months, take the money that you've now invested and buy that good. An asset could be anything that appreciates or reduces a tax bill. So it could still be a liability, but it reduces their tax bill. And I'm not going to go into the technicalities because that's out of our remit here. However, for our use or our purpose, what we are talking for the listeners here is I would put this definition of an asset forward. An asset is anything that increases your income. Anything.
Now, there's a lot of conversation around who pays more taxes, if it is the rich or if it is the poor, right? When you are basically going out and during a day, if you go to a restaurant, you have to pay taxes there. If you buy a car, you have to pay taxes there. So why is it even a conversation that, the rich pay less taxes or the poor pay more taxes? Why is it a conversation like that?
Because it's true, the rich generally pay less tax. A rich person walks into a Tesco's or a Sainsbury's, they're not going to get a different bill than another person, right? They're still going to pay the same VAT on those goods. They're still going to pay the same thing. So that's all the same. However, the differences come in if you can pay yourself from your own company, you can structure it in a way that you pay less income tax through paying a bit of salary, paying dividends and so forth, and then also deferring income. Also, your pension payments or contributions can be different. So that increases your tax sort of gap, if you want to use it that way. Where a PAYE person, just gets paid salary and bonus. And now those are the most highly taxed sources of income in the UK, definitely, in the UK.
Welcome back to the show. It is your girl Sarah right here on Relax Radio. Welcome back to the show. I'm super excited to be here because we're having a very interesting conversation, something very positive for a change as well. We're talking about ways in which you can, save yourself, completely change your life around, and make the change that you really need to. Um, Especially when it comes to burnout, and also the different effects of burnout that we've all had to face, or things that some of us are even currently facing right now. So obviously that is what we're talking about, and we're talking about ways in which we can actually make that change, make that decision to get away from all the toxicity of the burnout as well. So let's get back into that conversation. But before we get back to that conversation, a quick reminder to actually text me on 07852473473. You can ask me any questions. You can ask me any thoughts, or if you have any thoughts, any opinions that you want to share with me, or you can text me on that number that is there on that banner, and you can ask me anything that you want to ask. So make sure you do that, because I would absolutely love to answer your questions. I would love to share your thoughts and experiences with everyone else who's listening in as well. So make sure you do that, okay? Now, also while you're at it, make sure you go follow our socials, which is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Now, that way you can stay up to date. You can update it rather. You can stay up to date on everything that is happening, and also you can make sure that you're informed but also entertained about everything that is happening all around the world. Now let's get back into this conversation, because obviously I will be telling you about the stories of some people who actually changed their lives around. Now, there was this guy actually called Spencer Carter, who had been signed off work for 3 months because of stress. Now, before that time was up, before his 3 month break, before he was able to take the 3 month break, his employers encouraged him back early. And then double the size of the team he managed, right? And they also doubled his responsibility. And basically in the last couple of years, everything got worse, he says, with a degree of understatement, right? And obviously you can see how capitalistic and competitive the society is out there, because this guy was just about to sign off from work, because of stress, and his employers just doubled the size of the team he managed, and they doubled the workload he had to do. So his general physician, in fact, had warned him that the stress was going to kill him. But thanks to his astronomically high blood pressure, uh, he took what he says voluntary redundancy to actually save his life. Now, although he had tried counseling in the run up to his redundancy, it hadn't actually helped him with his overly demanding working environment as a business operations manager for this global company, right? And his entire job was just endless data and spreadsheets, running team across different time zones, and being responsible for huge budgets in a highly competitive culture, right? So because of that, he was constantly under a lot of stress, and especially if it's a global company and you're managing teams all across the world, and that means you have to always be on, like, people always have to be able to reach you at any time of at literally any times, right? Which means that any time of the day you'd always have to be alert. You can be asleep, but your phone would still have to be on ringer or whatnot. So obviously it's not too much of a surprise that he had stress, because if you're managing such a huge company, if you're managing so much of work, then your stress is in fact going to get worse, right? And he also said that he was drinking very heavily, and he could feel his relationship falling apart. And he said that his behavior started becoming very erratic, and that and he felt like he couldn't turn off his you couldn't turn off his life. And basically, even if he did try to take a holiday, he couldn't really switch off from work, So, he would take the holiday and whatnot. But even while he was in that holiday, even while he was taking that break, he would still be very, very stressed out, anxious, or worried, because he always had to, make sure he was available if people wanted to contact him. Now, Carter actually agonized over abandoning a well paid career he had spent decades building. But in the end, he actually thought, what am I doing to myself? Because the truth is, a lot of us actually feel this, when we spend decades building a career for ourselves, perfecting that career, trying to get all these good jobs on your CV or your resume, so that when you finally apply for your dream job, when you finally are at a position to apply for that, favorite company that is probably like a global company, when you finally spend so much of time, perfecting your career and whatnot, you feel so bad. Like you agonize over the fact that, like once you get the job, and because of the stress you can't handle it, you agonize over the fact that, oh, I have to, leave now. I have to let go of this job that I spent years trying to get. So what exactly is the point? So that is a very common feeling, and I'm pretty sure, a lot of us actually go through that. It's not just Carter, but so many other people out there definitely go through that as well. um, but a recent study that was actually conducted by the World Health Organization and the International Labor Organization found that working at least 55 hours a week was actually, in fact, causing hundreds of thousands of premature deaths. And it was, in fact, linked to a high risk of stroke and heart diseases. So, long hours were actually described as a serious health hazard. To people who worked in environments where they had really long working hours as well. So, obviously, because of that, and also because it's very unhealthy to work for such long hours, you sort of begin to question as to whether all that work you put in, you sort of begin to question as to whether, you know, all the time you spent building that career was worth it. Because, at the end of the day, if it means giving up your health, both your physical and your mental health, giving up your family and all these relationships that you've made to actually make sure that you still have that job, it's not really the smartest, or the greatest feeling in the world, right? Now, burnout is actually the name that is given to a host of symptoms which are caused by an overwhelming and very stressful environment. And this includes things like fatigue, muscle aches, headaches, and stomach issues, and well as and also, other psychological effects such as listlessness and loss of motivation. It also leads to higher rates of anxiety, depression, and suicide. Now, numerous surveys have actually found that when it comes to burnout, it has actually, in fact, increased among workers in the past year, as work and life boundaries have become blurred by people working from home, and anxiety over job security has increased. Now, this is what I was talking about as well, right? Because when it comes to your work life balance, when it came to being in the middle of a pandemic and doing all your work from home, then that line between your work and your personal life actually sort of gets blurred, right? Because you anyway do your office work from home, you're anyway spending a lot of time at home. So then obviously you have no choice but to do all of your office work at home as well. So because of all of those issues, because of all of those changes that we've had to make, changes we've had to adjust to, that line between work life and office life has in fact been blurred. And like I said, for those in jobs who are directly dealing with the COVID crisis, exhaustion has long since set in. Because if you actually take all the healthcare workers out there, if you take people who were very involved with dealing with the COVID crisis, not just healthcare workers but other people, other essential services. So a lot of those people actually are very, very exhausted. And I know it's very easy for us to complain about how much we have to stay at home, and how we're all bored and we feel like so bad staying at home. But if you actually look at this in the perspective of all those people, these essential workers, like our healthcare workers, other people who provide services for us, if we look at these people, you will begin to understand, or you realize that they actually haven't had they haven't had any break ever since the pandemic began. They've always been busy because they've always had to cater to everyone else who was facing, you know, the virus, everyone else who was going through all the effects of the virus. So because of that, because of situations, because of instances like that, you begin to understand that especially people who are involved with the COVID crisis have been exhausted for a very, very long time. Now, like I said, you know, when we're talking about Spencer Carter and burnout, you know, sometimes it's sometimes when you're in this kind of situation, when you're constantly, you know, stressed out, when you're constantly worrying as well about, you know, your life, your mental health, your relationships, it gets very hard to focus, and it gets very hard to, you know, be okay, because at the end of the day, as human beings, there's also only a certain amount of struggle we can take. There's only a certain amount of suffering we can go through as well, because at one point, even if you don't want to give up, the rest of your body will give up, right? And that's why you get sick, you know. And you know, that's why you get sick, like physically, but also mentally. This is why you fall ill, because the rest of your body is tired, and they want that break, they need that break, no matter how much you want to not take a break, or no matter how much it is hard for you to take a break. Your body just, you know, tells you like, no, you know, we're done with this, we need to move on, we need to get better. So it's very, very important to in fact listen to your body, you know, to all these symptoms, especially if you have any of these conditions, if you feel any of the things that you know, any of these symptoms that I mentioned, if you feel any of those, it's very, very important for you to actually make sure you get help, to make sure you try to change things around, you try to, you know, quit your job. But you know, I know again it's something someone in a privileged position can do, you know, especially things like quitting your job. That something like that is that can only be done with someone who has enough financial privilege to actually quit their job and take a break and, you know, rest for a bit. Again, you know, that is privilege in itself. But stay tuned, because I will be back to talk about this conversation and why it's very, very important for you to save yourself before it gets too late.
Again. But now, if you say to a child, if I went up to a child and said, you've had one to forget, God, there'd be an inquest. Me, why did you reject my son? Oh, I haven't rejected your son.
I want to talk about, you know, how the generation gap, you know, has how much it's changed, especially when you check the youth nowadays in comparison, you know, to people back in the day.
I'd say when I was younger, it was more disciplined. Not now.
In comparison to now.
Not at all. Not now. You know, the way things are nowadays, the younger generation, you seem that they can't accept the word no, if that makes sense. They can't
accept rejection, essentially, is all you're trying to say.
Yeah, they can't accept the word no. So if you, how did I do? Well, you didn't do very well. And they get upset, you know. And when I was a youngster, my father used to say to me, because I used to be sport mad when I was very young. Well, I still am sport mad, but like participating in different sports. And if I had a bad game, for example, I'd say to me, you had one to forget. That's it.
Your dad sounds like a smart guy. I mean, yeah, that's the real fact of the matter, yeah.
You know, he'd say to me, you had one to forget. Get over it. And that was it. So I'd dust myself down and do it again. But now, if you say to a child, if I went up to a child and said, you've had one to forget, God, there'd be an inquest. An inquest. Me, why did you reject my son? Oh, I haven't rejected your son. Or daughter. I've just told them that they need to buck their ideas up.
That's the truth right there. I mean, if you think about it, if you check the generations, like right now in the US as well, I've seen a lot of these things as well. In the UK, you know, you get medals for participation. But what's the point? What are you trying to? Yeah, what's the point? Either you win or you lose. People are so afraid to put that whole notion of losing. You know, when it comes to right now, the generation gap is just crazy. You know how much. A lot has changed. Social media has taken control of our lives, and we don't even realize it anymore. We're crippled because of it.
That's absolutely right, Nick. Because, as you said, you know, nowadays it seems that you get rewarded for failure. You know, for the life of me, Nick, I can't get my head around that. Perhaps I'm just getting old and morbid, I don't know. I just can't get my head around how you could be rewarded for failure.
Welcome back to the show. It is your girl Sarah right here on the Sunrise, and it is in fact the final few minutes of my show. But don't worry, because I still have a lot left to talk to you about how you can change your life. You can take the necessary steps you need to completely turn your life around, especially when it comes to burnout. Right. So we'll get back into that conversation. But before I get back into that conversation, want to quickly remind you that you can be a part of this show. You just need to text me on 07852 and that way you can actually share your thoughts and your opinions with me, and you can be a part of the show. But let's get back into this conversation now. A lot of people actually with supportive employees can actually return to their job after a burnout, but for Carter this was actually no longer an option. And the truth is, in a lot of instances we don't really have supportive employers. We don't have employers who will understand the fact that, burnout is something serious. It can actually affect us a lot, and no way are some of them actually going to let us come back to our jobs after we've gotten better. But the thing is, he was quite lucky to get a good redundancy package, and be able to turn, or rather be able to turn to his passion, which was archaeology. Right? He basically went from a job that paid him basically £100,000 to a sector where salaries basically began at £19,000, right? So obviously, what's important is, even though the pay was very less, he still enjoyed it. And that's what's important, right? Because it doesn't matter if this job pays you really well. It doesn't matter. If you earn good money, if it really really affects your mental and your physical health, then that is not something that you should be working at. That is not something you should be putting all of your effort into, because in a place like that you're constantly under so much of stress, and things could go wrong for you, very 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 suddenly as well, because you're under so much of stress, you're under so much of pressure as well. And then when you're under so much of stress and pressure like that, it becomes hard for you to focus, right? It gets very hard for you to be productive and efficient as well. And also, it can lead to you having anxiety, depression, or even sometimes suicide. Right. So obviously it's very very important for you to understand. Now, like I said earlier, even though this was the case with Carter, not a lot of us are actually able to do that, right? Because not a lot of us have that financial privilege. Not a lot of us can actually make those changes and decide to quit our job, especially if you're the primary caregiver in a family. You can't really, you really don't have an option but to keep working, and to sacrifice your mental and your physical health to make sure you can provide for your family. But that's the truth. But if you are in one of those positions, if you can actually change your life around and do something that will definitely help you and make you much much happier, well, make sure you go for it. But getting back to this story about Carter, now he actually quit his job all the way back in 2011, but his recovery has actually not in fact been very straightforward, because in 2017 he actually describes what he describes as something called the second round of the burnout, which is what he would essentially call PTSD, because everything hit him, like all those negative feelings, all those things he felt, it all came back to him. And it didn't matter how happy he was after a couple of years, it still all came back to him, right? So what's important is that even after all of this, he has still become a specialist in what he's doing. He has published a couple of papers, and he has successfully changed his career. And even though the pandemic has affected his job and his health, he says that when he thinks about it, that career change might have actually saved my life, right? Now, what you need to understand is when it comes to changing your career, an emotionally rewarding job you love is also necessarily not a shield against burning out, right? Because when you're burning out, you can basically call everything into question. However, if you decide that you need to change things around, you need to make that change for yourself, then go ahead, do that, because you're capable of doing that. It's not like you're going to fail, but you always need to prioritize your mental and your physical health, because as a human being, there's only so much you can give as well, there's only so much you can change as well. So you definitely need to make that choice. You definitely need to make sure that when it comes to changing your life around, if you are given the choice, then you should take it, because there's no point in struggling, there's no point in you going through all these negative feelings, there's no point in you feeling all these negative things as well, and constantly putting yourself at risk, putting your family and your loved ones and people who are close to you at risk as well. Because like I said, when it comes to burnout, you can actually lose some of the very close relationships you've had with your friends and your family. And what's the point in your whole life being all about work? So make that choice to actually change. To when you're given the choice, make sure you take it, and then you completely change things and turn it around for yourself, because at the end of the day, you're not going to regret it. You're going to in fact appreciate the fact that you could change when you had the opportunity. You took the chance when you had the opportunity, and you don't want to be regretting about things in your life that you couldn't do or you didn't do, right? No one wants that regret in life. So if you have that opportunity, take it and make that change. But it's actually time for me to head out of here. But don't worry, because next we have Jamie on the chat trap, and she'll be here to keep you company and tell you about everything related to self love, self care, whatever it is. She'll be here to actually keep you company. So make sure you stay tuned. But it's time for me to head out of here, and I really hope you have a good day until I come see you again tomorrow. But I hope you have a very good day.